Now, this whole zombie affair has been very influential over the years, even though it probably fails in its original conception as an argument against physicalism. But before we get into a rigorous critique of the zombie argument, I think it's interesting to look at a problem that arose early on. Well, what's the problem? See, zombies are supposed to be exactly like us, physically and functionally. If there's any difference at all, the physicalist can walk in and say, look, see that part right there? That's where consciousness could possibly reside. We should study that part. And the whole argument collapses. Well, shortly after Saul Kripke published his paper in 1972, philosophers started asking some questions, like, how exactly does this zombie thing work? Here, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're out driving with your friend, and he's a zombie. And you say to your friend, you know, I'm starting to get sleepy. How do you feel about driving for a while? Well, what's he supposed to say? I'm a zombie. I don't have any feelings. I haven't had feelings for years. I mean, isn't this behavior and thinking something that's significantly different than what you'd expect from a real person? It's even weirder than that. Okay, you're here watching this video, and I'm here making these videos about the theory of consciousness. Well, what if I were replaced by my zombie twin? Would I still be making these videos? Why? I mean, if I don't have consciousness, why would I care about consciousness? Why would I be qualified? You see, part of the problem is that we see these badly made horror movies. And in the movie, there's usually some lethargic character who's a menace, and he doesn't seem very bright. But that's not the zombie argument. A zombie would be just as clever as you or I. He has our same functional brain. So he might try to hide in the regular population. In order to do this, the zombie would have to lie. But what motivation would a psychological zombie have for lying? I mean, a psychological zombie would have a functional brain like yours and mine. I'd think that he'd probably be serving some purpose in society. Why would he lie about having consciousness if he didn't have consciousness? When I think about lying, it has to do with my feelings. I might be afraid that I'll be ostracized, so I might lie about having consciousness. Or, you know, I might be, it might hurt my pride to feel like I'm defective in some way, so I might try to deceive myself and others about my having consciousness. But I can't see any reason why a psychological zombie would lie, any more than my laptop computer would lie. All the lying has to come from the feeling part of our brain. And the feelings are something that the zombie is lacking. So any mechanism a zombie would have that would motivate him to lie has to reside in the physical part of his brain, since that's all he has. But if this is true, then the strict physical equivalence breaks down and the zombie argument fails. In fact, if a zombie becomes aware in any way that he's a zombie, that means he either has to readily admit he's a zombie or he has to lie about it. And either way, that makes him psychologically and functionally different than us. Well, those who support the zombie argument have come up with ways to try to rescue it. One was to suggest that maybe a zombie is unaware of the fact that he's a zombie. Well, this is neat. This brings us right up to the boundary of the mind-body problem. We all have a sensor that tells us that we're having a conscious experience. It's sort of like the gas gauge in our car. But in our car, there's more than just the gauge that's on the instrument panel. There also has to be some kind of a sensor in the tank that tells the system how much fuel is in the tank. Without the sensor, the gauge on the instrument panel would be pretty much worthless. So, if consciousness is somehow non-physical, the sensor we have for this consciousness somehow must reach across the boundary into the spiritual. We could try to claim that the entire consciousness detecting system is in the spiritual realm. But that doesn't get us anywhere, because eventually information has to flow across that boundary back into my brain so that I can move my lips and tell you that I'm conscious. Well, if a zombie were unaware that he wasn't conscious, then he doesn't have to lie. It would be like as if his gauge, so to speak, was broken, and it was always fooling him into thinking that he was conscious. Maybe he just remembers having a conscious experience, but he never actually has them. Well, in 1998, 2 years after David Chalmers published his zombie book, a philosopher named Nigel Thomas published a paper. And in it, he showed that this line of reasoning wasn't going to rescue the zombie argument. He showed that if zombies have a broken gauge that always fools them into thinking that they are conscious, and that if we are functionally equivalent to zombies, then any of us could have this broken gauge, and that there's no real discernible difference between a zombie and a real person, and the zombie argument fails. Nigel Thomas also dealt with the idea that the words coming out of a zombie's mouth were meaningless. This was another idea that philosophers had come up with to rescue the zombie argument. Well, the bottom line is this. The moment a zombie is created, I guess we could expect him to be pretty much like us. I mean, if I were initially created as a zombie and asked, "Are you conscious?" I would probably say yes, because I have my memories and that's my belief about myself, that I'm conscious. But eventually things would start to get strange. I mean, I'd have to start to notice that I'm not having a conscious experience, and I'd have my memories, and I'd have to say, you know, I remember being conscious, but I don't think I'm conscious anymore. I know it's an uncomfortable thought, but I might be a zombie. So, the zombie argument may fail because it's logically impossible, and that was a requirement, that it had to be logically possible in order for the zombie argument to stand. Well, what good is the zombie argument? Well, we already saw that it brought us right to the boundary of the mind-body problem, and there's some interesting thoughts we have about that. But there's something else. In 1950, a mathematician by the name of Alan Turing wrote a paper, and in it, he proposes an idea that's now known as the Turing test. The Turing test works like this. A human tester sits on one side of a wall so that he can't see what's on the other side. On the other side is a computer. Now, if the computer can fool the human into thinking that it's an intelligent agent, then the computer has passed the test. Alan Turing, in his original paper, never defines what he means by intelligence. The Turing test has evolved over the years, but during all this evolution, the idea of consciousness and the idea of intelligence seem to get muddled. I think the zombie argument might be an interesting way to help break up some of this confusion. So I'd like to make some videos in the future about the Turing test and the zombie argument. So I hope everybody is enjoying this look into cognition as much as I am. I find the whole thing fascinating. Thank you for your attention.